ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we send peace and blessings upon the last and final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So over the last few months, we were going through a certain book that discussed some of the Orientalist arguments that were made in the 19th/20th century concerning the Quran's authorship. We went through some examples that illustrate to us that the Quran itself, it didn't come from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, rather it was divinely authored. We went through a host of evidences. We looked at many reports that point to this reality. And now we're going to be starting a different book. And this book is authored by Imam an-Nawawi. And it's called At-Tibyan fi Adabi Hamalat al-Quran. The etiquette of the bearers of the Quran. And what's interesting about this particular book is the way in which it approaches the Quranic subject. So the book doesn't talk about memorization. It doesn't talk about daily reading. It doesn't talk about the mere reward someone gains through reading letters and words in the Quran. Rather, it speaks about the character of the one who carries this book. It sheds light on the humility, sincerity, and purity of the reader who really connects to the Quran in the correct way. And it doesn't only speak about the merits of that person, it also mentions how the true bearer of the Quran doesn't only do good, but the true bearer of the Quran stays away from bad. Whether it's pride, it's ego, it's backbiting, it's malice, these things are considered the danger zone for the carrier of the Quran, because he's polluting the very thing he's carrying. And it's important that we take a step and really internalize the word bearer of the Quran. What does it mean to bear the Quran? What does it mean to bear divine words and divine meanings? What are the responsibilities that are intrinsically related to being of the bearers of the Quran? But before we take a deeper dive into the contents of the book, I want to speak a little bit about the author. Imam an-Nawawi is a phenomenal personality. And it's very easy to find learned people who dedicated their lives to the pursuit of knowledge. But it's very rare to find people who lived the knowledge they taught to other people, who acted upon the concepts and the theories that they conveyed to those in their communities. Those who left behind them never fading legacies that are still being commemorated till today. If we enter any mosque in the UK, in any other country, we're bound to find one of the books that he authored, rahimahullah. In every single mosque approximately, you see Riyadh al-Salihin on the shelf. And it was authored by Imam an-Nawawi. In any Islamic educational institution, his commentary on the famous Sahih Muslim is studied by students of knowledge in huge numbers. In every educational faculty, namely in Saudi Arabia, his commentaries on Shafi'i fiqh are studied in quite some depth. So this is a man who's still spoken of. His works are still benefited from. But what allowed him to gain acceptance, not only from the people, but more importantly from his Lord, that his legacy remains something that's commemorated till today. Imam an-Nawawi was born in the year 631 after Hijrah. And he was born in a small town known as Nawa. And that's where the term Nawawi comes from. It's an ascription to the small town that he was born and bred in, rahimahullah. And this is situated in modern day Syria. So Imam an-Nawawi was born in Syria, and this is where he spent a huge fraction of his life, rahimahullah. What's very significant about this particular era that he was born into, 631 after Hijri? Anybody? Golden age? Okay, what else? This is when Mongol invasions were heightened. So just prior to the fall of the Mongol Empire, which happened in approximately 656, Imam an-Nawawi was born 20 years before this. So it was a time of political unrest and conflict for Muslims throughout the world. And Imam al-Nawawi played a pivotal role in guiding lay people on identifying their role amidst this never-ending conflict. So the Mongols were ruling over the people with an iron fist throughout the world. Al-Imam al-Nawawi was born into this time where he never lived under Mongol rule per se, but he was aware of the atrocities and the oppression and the tyranny of the Mongol Empire. Al-Imam al-Nawawi as a young child, what was very interesting about him, if we look at all the primary biographical works, is he disliked to play and he preferred to read. And it's very odd that if we look at a child, how many children prefer to read over playing? And this wasn't because his parents considered playing to be something that was forbidden. Rather, it's because he tasted the sweetness of education. He understood that through reading, he enriched his soul. He broadened his scope. He renewed his spirits. And this is what allowed him to exceed as a child. He was beyond those of his age. A traveling scholar noticed him crying while other boys tried to force him to play, because he preferred to recite the Quran. And these are some narrations that are mentioned in some biographical works, that as a young boy he would cry because he felt pressured that people wanted him to play when he wanted to connect to the words of his Creator. The love of Quran was inculcated in his heart from a very early age. And this is what led to him being a bearer of this book and later authoring a work that was inspired from his life, rahimahullah. His father took him to Damascus at the age of 18. And some reports suggest that he was taken to Damascus at the age of 18 because other scholars and experienced activists, they saw something special in Imam al-Nawawi as a young boy. They told his father that this young boy has exceptional potential, and it's something you as a father should capitalize on. So the father had the intention of taking him to Damascus. Why Damascus? Why Damascus? So it was central to where he lived, but also because it was a thriving social educational hub within this particular time that he lived in. In fact, scholars throughout the world, they traveled to Damascus in pursuit of Islamic knowledge, because that's where scholars, they lived, they taught, and they left their legacies. So his father took him to Damascus, which wasn't too far from where he lived. And he secluded himself in a classroom in a school that he was enrolled into, and he dedicated himself to learning. Some reports suggest that he was learning multiple subjects per day, from Quran to Hadith to Fiqh and to Balagha, rhetorics. He memorized large texts in short periods, and the first text that he ever memorized was the Quran itself. The book that he was attached to from a young age, eventually he happened to memorize, because he read this book so much, he frequented its contemplation so much that it rested in his heart, rahimahullah. Among the reports that are very thought-provoking is Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah, he ate very little. And it wasn't because he disliked food. I think all humans have an inclination to want to eat more, play more, enjoy more, befriend more. These are human tendencies, it's a human condition. But it's because he understood that only through controlling himself and suppressing his desires and whims, it's the only way he could reach heights. So there's one report where he said that I would eat easily consumable foods so I could save that time that it would take me to digest foods that aren't as easily consumable, to spend that time in reading certain books, studying with my teachers. So he mastered time management. He was very effective when it came to managing his day-to-day schedule. And that's what allowed him to be so successful. He studied under many respected scholars of his time. And among the patterns that we find with the earlier scholars is before they exhausted all educational avenues in their local towns, they never left their countries. And this is a point that's worthy of reflection. That many of us think about traveling to multiple countries, claiming that we're going to be enthusiastic and zeal-led and driven when we get to that country. But if you're lazy here, you'll be lazy there. And these are one of the lessons that we can draw from the lives of the earlier scholars. Throughout his life, some mention that when he reached 20, 25, he began to author a plethora of works. Among them was Riyadh al-Salihin, which is a collection of hadith on manners, worship and spirituality. And it's widely studied throughout the world. In fact, if you go on YouTube, you'll probably find these lessons being conducted in every mosque throughout the country. That's how widely accepted this book is. And among the distinguishing features that this book possesses is accepted among all different sects. There's not a single Islamic sect except they held Imam al-Nawawi in high regard. Despite the theological differences, despite the political unrest, they still held this particular man in high regard because he penetrated the hearts of everybody that he reached, rahimahullah. Al-Arba'in al-Nawawiyah, the 40 hadiths that he compiled summarizing the core teachings of Islam. And we went through these prophetic reports just, I think, maybe 6 months to a year ago approximately. And these were all compiled by him himself, rahimahullah ta'ala. He also has a book called Al-Adhkar, dedicated to explaining, breaking down, and really simplifying certain supplications that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to adhere to in his day-to-day life. And these books are still read in homes, mosques and institutions across the world. It's not amazing that he authored a book at such a young age. What's amazing is that thousands of years later, these books are still being read by millions of people. It's the acceptance of his action that makes him exceptional. Because there are people today who are non-Muslim who author works at a very young age. Authorship itself isn't sufficient enough to make a person extraordinary. But it's the impact that person has on the people. It's a transformative relationship he has with those around him. And this is something that's very vivid in the life of Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah. When the Mongol Empire collapsed in the year 656 approximately, the Mamluks, they capitalized on this and they established their own state. Now where he lived, which was Syria, Damascus, there was a sultan called Sultan Baybar, and he was the king who ruled that particular region of the Islamic world, and he was under Mamluk power. This particular king, because it was still short, I think it was close to the collapse of the Mongol Empire, he wanted to inflate the prices to strengthen the economy in his country. So people were dealing with a financial crisis. Al-Imam al-Nawawi was among the only knowledgeable person in his country to speak out against the king. And this was something that he was persecuted for. In fact, some reports suggest that he was evicted from Syria because he spoke out against the king and told him it's unjust to inflate the prices while you are living in luxury yourself. You're going to make livelihood for the masses difficult while you enjoy your varying houses and your gardens and your fruits and different dishes, but you're making other people go through poverty. So the king tried to impose this tax system during hardship. And Imam Nawawi, he refused to approve it because he was part of a committee where he was among the scholars who would approve the king's governmental verdicts. So he challenged the sultan and he said to him, and it's a famous quote in his biography, "Sell your palaces and sell your gold, then ask me to help." And this was among the most confronting statements Imam Nawawi said in the face of a person of authority and leadership. And he was told to leave Damascus. And when he left Damascus, one of the people, they begged him to stay because they saw him as a valuable asset. Somebody who taught and changed the lives of hundreds of people. And to which he responded, "I will not stay in justice. Something that's despised in my eyes. And I will distance myself from injustice." So he left and he migrated to another land. And that's because he didn't want to be anywhere where injustice became rife and widespread. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he died in the year 676. In the year 676. How long did he live for? 45 years. Just let that sink in for a second. He died at 45 years old. From when he started to learn Islam officially and formally to when he passed on, he opened up schools and institutions. He studied under the tutelage of varying scholars. He traveled to different cities and towns in pursuit of Islamic knowledge. He changed the lives of hundreds of people, and he authored all these educational academic works in just 45 years. Most people in 45 years just about managed to read the Quran with tajweed. And yet we have this exceptional personality who's accomplished so much in just 45 years. He lived for 45 years. But how long has he been in his grave for? It's something worth calculating. And I've mentioned this example many times before. And it illustrates to us the reality of the afterlife and how fragile and temporary this world actually is. His funeral was attended by people in large numbers. And his absence left a deep void in Damascus and other countries. But even though he passed on, his books remain alive. And even more than that, his example is still living. A man of knowledge, a man of courage, a man of simplicity, and a man of deep sincerity. Rahimahullah. There are three major lessons that come to mind when you think of the life of this personality. Is number one, sincerity is greater than quantity. We often focus on achieving big accomplishments. Whether it's completing a bachelor's degree, it's pursuing higher education, it's gaining a promotion in our workplaces, it's teaching family members, it's becoming an imam at a local mosque. But the pursuit of the action in and of itself isn't noble unless it's coupled with a sincere intent. And this is what we find, that even if we look at the four schools of thought, were they the only schools of thought that existed in that time period? No. There were a plethora of schools of thoughts that existed, but these were the four men who remained known to mankind. Why? Because Allah placed acceptance in their works and their efforts. There were lots of Imam Nawawis in his time. He wasn't the only one to teach. He wasn't the only one that spoke to the king. He wasn't the only member of the committee. But why is it only his name reached us? Because Allah accepted his efforts. And it's that acceptance that is the pinnacle of all accomplishments. When you're accepted by Allah, everything you do will be blessed in multifolds. And that's what we learn from this. It's not about quantity, it's about the quality. And this is further echoed in the second verse of Surah Al-Mulk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. He's the one who created life and death to test you, to see which of you is best in doing deeds. Not more in doing deeds, best in doing deeds. Preference is given to quality over quantity in our discourse and in our tradition. And this is exactly what he strived for. He may have done less than others, but the less that he did was magnified to such a degree that he outweighed and outnumbered those who came after him, who lived double his life, rahimahullah. The second lesson, let knowledge shape your character. We often find that the more knowledge we gain, the more unruly our character becomes. And this can happen for multiple reasons. Number one is because it's a theoretical process that we make ourselves undergo. That we're passively reading book after book. We're consuming content after content. We're attending lectures just so we can say we've memorized X amount of reports. But how much of that information are we actually acting upon? You know, there's lectures where the imam or the teacher may advise the crowd to pray a certain prayer. And one of the attendees may memorize every single prophetic report that's narrated concerning that prayer. But until he actually goes and prays that prayer frequently, he's not genuine. Words aren't enough. It's about acting upon what we preach. It's about living as an example. Because this is exactly what he did, rahimahullah. There wasn't a single thing he taught except he carried it out himself. And that's why all his books, they received this level of acceptance. That's why his legacy is still commemorated. Because he was of those people who actualized every theoretical concept or idea they spoke of, rahimahullah. Last but not least is speak the truth in the face of injustice. We find that even if we look at the first three generations post the demise of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the word qari, which is the one who reads the Quran, is often referred to formally as a qari, and it's the singular of the word qurra. In that time period, this term was interchangeably used with the word faqih. The qari was a faqih and the faqih was a qari. Because reciting Quran came hand in hand with a deep-rooted understanding of Islamic texts. But now, we've become people who are qurra, but we have no understanding of texts. The Quran fails to pass our throats. And the reason why Imam Nawawi was able to become of those who embodied the true meaning of a qari was because even though it wasn't his duty to fight injustice, he wasn't in the military, he wasn't somebody who was trained in physical combat, he was an educator. But despite that, he understood that he had a pressing responsibility to speak out against injustice because of the books he read. How could all that knowledge that he memorized concerning justice, concerning the forbidding of oppression, the rights of the innocent and the vulnerable, how could all of that be foregone in an instance? He acted upon everything he read and everything he heard. And that's why he spoke the truth at his own detriment. He was forced to leave his family, his children, evicted from the very country that he buried his memories and his efforts in, rahimahullah. But he acted upon the knowledge he learned. And we're living in a day and age where speaking the truth has never been more important. Especially we're living in an era of narrative war, where our speech has the ability to change public opinion. Concerning genocide that's happening throughout the world, that's mass broadcasted by Western media as something which isn't a genocide. So we have a pivotal role to play in this, to be people who speak out in the face of injustice. People who don't fear the blame of the blameless. People who act upon the little knowledge that they have, for it's the action that's accepted. The knowledge itself is just theory unless it's actualized and internalized. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to act upon what we learn. We ask Allah to make us true bearers of the Quran. Inshallah, in the next session, we'll begin the first section of the book where we speak about the merits and the virtues of those who bear the Quran and what it actually means to be a bearer of the Quran. Jazakumullahu khairan. Look forward to your contributions and your thoughts with us. Jazakumullahu khairan.